All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network and host of the African History Network show. It is Sunday, November 3rd, 2024. And I wanted to come on and do a preview of an exciting new 12-week online history course that I teach called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So this class is going to start up Saturday. It's going to start up Saturday, November 9th, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, we have the information there where you can register for this online history course, and the class lesson plan is there as well. So I'm going to do an overview. We have cover about 200 slides in the class. There's 15 books that we reference. There are video clips, excerpts of interviews that I've done with some of our scholars. When you scroll down, you'll see the class lesson plan as well. So you can download this class lesson plan. Also, just click on the download button. All right. This content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children as well. It's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. Okay. So when we deal with the transatlantic slave trade, we have to understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, and South America, and came to this land prior to 1619. And I talk about this here in the class lesson plan. We give you a brief overview. There are 80 to 100 articles that we reference, 15 books, etc. We have to understand that African people have been in the land we call the United States of America going back at least 51,700 years ago. One of the books that I use is from my friend who's now an ancestor, Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. So if we look at this, I'm going to go to the slideshow here, go to the slides. And I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. It has expanded a lot since I first started teaching in 2017. I've been studying history 34 years now. And many of you all have seen me on either Roland Martin Unfiltered or seen my show, the African History Network show. All right, so we can't start studying our history in slavery. Even when we study the transatlantic slave trade, we have to we can't start in 1619 or in the 1440s when the Portuguese get involved. We have to understand the history chronologically and deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who entered the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD. Okay, from North Africa, coming from Morocco in 711 AD. And they're going to take the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe, and this is what's going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. Okay, so we also have to understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, and South America and have been in the land we call the United States of America at least 51,700 years ago. So we see an attack on the teaching of African American history. We saw that in Florida. We've seen it in other states like Oklahoma and Georgia that have passed laws that suppress the teaching of African American history, the history of slavery, the history of civil rights. And they say things like they don't want to make children feel guilty about what their ancestors have done, or teach subjects that make children feel sad and things of this nature. And this ties into also the book banning that we've seen coming from local school boards, but also these laws being passed at the state level, especially in former Confederate states, states that made up the Confederate States of America during the U.S. Civil War, 1861 to 1865. We've all heard about the College Board in Florida and how they rejected the African American Studies class, the Advanced Placement African American Studies class in Florida. This is an article from CNN.com. College Board hits back at Florida's initial rejection of Advanced Placement African American Studies course and admits it made mistakes in rollout. We know that led to protests. in Florida, and also African American churches have organized in Florida to start teaching African American history in the churches. I actually did a broadcast of the African History Network show dealing with that. Okay, we've seen these laws at the state level also impact how African American History Month is celebrated in some of these states, because with these new laws, it causes a lot of times the laws are not written very clearly, and it causes apprehension from teachers because they're not exactly sure which topics they can teach and which topics they can't teach, and they don't want to lose their jobs as well. So we see a suppression many times in the celebration of African American History Month as well. This is an article from Axios.com. New rules are limiting how teachers can teach Black History Month. New rules are limiting how teachers can teach Black History Month. There was an article from USA Today that dealt with mock slave auctions, racist lessons, how U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes Black students. Okay, and this is a piece from this was from, I think, 2022. This article was from 2021. This article was from. And then you have another one from USA Today. Republican state lawmakers want to punish schools that teach the 1619 Project. Republican state lawmakers want to punish schools that teach the 1619 Project. So the 1619 Project coming from the New York Times and journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones. And remember, when Donald Trump was president, he attacked the 1619 Project as well. We're gonna talk about that in a minute. And then you have this piece from NBCnews.com. New Florida standards teach students that some Black people benefited from slavery because it taught useful skills. So this was dealing with the new social studies standards for middle school students. And there was a whole backlash behind that. We covered that here on the African History Network show as well. Now, one of our great Grandmaster Scholar Warriors, Dr. John Henrik Clarke, taught us that all history is a current event. Everything that has ever happened continues to happen in some shape, form, or fashion. So we go through and look at thousands of years of history. In the first class, we lay a foundation, because I know people are coming to conversations like this with different levels of understanding. So one of the things that we do, if we look here at the class lesson plan that's on our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, we'll talk about Dinknesh, who Europeans call Lucy, who was Australopithecus afarensis, who dated back 3.2 million years ago, and she's known as the mother of all humankind. There's a global timeline of history that we use coming from blackpast.org. We talk about things like the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885 as well, where these 11 European nations divide Africa up into colonies, okay? And the geographical boundaries that we see today in Africa largely comes from, is largely a result of the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. I'm going to flip back over to the slideshow presentation here. All right, so when we look at Dinknesh, and her remains were found, it was about 40% of the remains, her remains that were found, and she got the name Lucy from the team that was working with Dr. Donald Johansen. She was found in 1974 in Ethiopia, and his team was listening to the song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by the Beatles, so they named her Lucy, okay? And anytime that I speak, I know I may say some things that are outside the circumference of some people's awareness. So just because you know everything that you know about what you know does not mean you know everything there is to know about what you know. There's still things that exist outside the circumference of your own awareness. I learned that from one of my teachers, Dr. Ray Hagins of the African Village. We also talk about Juneteenth some, okay? Now, I've done a lot of presentations dealing with the history of Juneteenth, June 19th, 1865, the history leading up to that. And I've been on shows, everybody from Areva Martin's show, CNN legal analyst Areva Martin, KBLA 1580 AM out of Southern California, to Carl Nelson's show, WOLB out of Baltimore. I've been on Roland Martin Unfiltered, the African History Network show, etc. But this is an article from 2021 from the New York Times. Most Americans know little or nothing about Juneteenth poll finds, okay? And it found that about 60% of Americans knew little or nothing about Juneteenth. It found that African Americans knew more than most Americans. Now, more people have found out about Juneteenth since this poll was taken in 2021. But unfortunately, a lot of what people think they know about Juneteenth is false, because contrary to what is said in mainstream media, Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. Okay, Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. And also the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. We know that Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware were exempt from the Emancipation Proclamation, okay, January 1st, 1863. And the Emancipation Proclamation was put in place. It was not designed to free the slaves. It was an ultimatum that Lincoln gave the South, and it was designed to bring the South back into the Union. That was the goal. It was designed to bring the South back into the Union. So I have extensive research on Juneteenth and leading up to it, but also it's important to understand that Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until December 18th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was adopted. Okay, so this is 6 months after Juneteenth. So how could Juneteenth be the last day of slavery? But I can constantly hear in mainstream media them misstating what happened. And even this past June for Juneteenth, I heard on MSNBC and CNN, things like this, them saying that, you know, this was the last day of slavery, etc. No, it was not. And Major General Gordon Granger, when he delivers General Order Number 3 on June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, there are about 250,000 enslaved Africans all throughout Texas, okay? All of them did not get the news on the same day. All of them did not get the news that they were free on the same day. It's going to take Major General Gordon Granger almost a year to go all throughout the state of Texas. And when he goes in, he has about 2,000 Union troops, most of them African-American men. They have to physically bring Texas back under the control of the Union, because Texas was part of the Confederacy. So it takes almost a year to go through Texas and deliver General Order Number 3 and physically bring Texas back under control of the Confederacy. So June 19th, 1865, even though it did happen, that was the agreed upon date to celebrate Juneteenth and celebrate enslaved Africans in Galveston, Texas, as well as Texas getting the word that they were free. But they did not all get the word on the same day. Okay, they were riding on horseback, not in Escalades. Major General Gordon Granger, they were not riding Escalades. They didn't have social media. Okay, so that's something else that you learn when you dig into this history. All right, now it's important to understand that Maryland did not abolish slavery until November 1st, 1864. November 1st, 1864. So this is almost 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. There's a really good article that I use in the second class that I teach, Black Resistance Movements, 1492 to 1968, from Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution to the Black Power movement. It's called The Not Quite Free State of Maryland. The Not Quite Free State of Maryland. And this piece is from the Washington Post. And it talks about how Maryland dragged its feet when it came to ending slavery. Okay. If we flip over to this here, I just pulled this article up. I want to show this to you. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. You can visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Register for this online course right now, this 12-week online course. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So you don't have to be live in class to watch it. You can go back and watch it a year from now, 2 years from now. You'll still have full access to the class. And the content is PG-13, so you can use this with your children. It's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing, anything like that. The not quite free state. Maryland dragged its feet on emancipation during Civil War. So this is from September 13th, 2013 by Miranda Spivak. And very quickly here, it talks about how the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed the slaves in the state that has seceded, went into effect January 1st, 1863. Now, the states that had seceded is talking about the Confederacy, but the Union had no authority to dictate to the Confederacy anything, because those 11 states separated from the Union, starting with South Carolina, December 20th, 1860. And they're going to set up their own government. They're going to form the Confederate States of America in early 1861. Right around February 1861, they form the Confederate States of America. They set up their own constitution, their own monetary system. So the Union has no authority to dictate to them to do anything. The Emancipation Proclamation was a military strategy, stating that if those territories in rebellion against the Union did not come back into the Union by January 1st, 1863, that their slaves would be set free. Okay. And the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was issued September 22nd, 1862. So as the article says, but Maryland didn't act until 1864. But Maryland did not act until 1864, when it held a referendum. And even then, the outcome wasn't at all certain. Even then, the outcome wasn't at all certain. And let me try to zoom in some for you on this. Okay. So it goes on to say the vote. So they had in Maryland, they put it on the ballot, okay, to determine whether or not they were going to end slavery. The vote tipped in favor of abolition only after the absentee ballots of soldiers fighting for the North were counted. The final tally was 30,174 in favor of freeing the slaves to 29,799 against it. Okay, so it barely passed. Okay, it barely passed. So on November 1st, 1864, Maryland's slaves were declared free only a few months before Congress would approve the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. And we know the 13th Amendment is going to be adopted December 18th, 1865. Okay. Many blacks in Maryland had taken matters into their own hands by that time, either escaping to the district or enlisting in the Union Army, where they served as free men. Okay. And it's going to be early in December 1865 when the 13th Amendment is going to be ratified, when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment. When Georgia passes the 13th Amendment in their state legislature, then because you need 3/4 of the state legislatures to ratify an amendment. That's the process of passing a amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Okay, it requires, and let me pull this up here from history.com as well. Here's a piece on this. The 13th Amendment ratified December 6, 1865, when Georgia ratified the 13th Amendment. Okay, hold on if I can. Let me show you this article here. So to amend the U.S. Constitution, the bill has to pass both the House and the Senate by 2/3 majority vote, and then it has to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures by 2/3 majority vote, which means the state legislatures have to vote on it as well. So this is from history.com, official website of the History Channel. We use resources and articles from a number of different sources. History.com is just one of them. On December 6, 1865, the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, officially ending the institution of slavery, is ratified. Quote, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Okay. Now, that, as I stated to the Detroit Reparations Task Force on March 2nd, 2024, when I gave my historical presentation to them, and it's on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, you can go see the presentation, and I did a visual presentation for them. This, the 13th Amendment is based upon a previous law called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Which, contrary to popular belief, people think that, this was created to re-enslave African Americans. No, that's false. And if you watch the extensive interview I did with historian Dr. Darrell Scott, who's a history professor, he was at Howard University. Now he's at Morgan State University. I think he's at Morgan State now. We deal with the history of that clause dating back to the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Okay, it's and the Northwest Ordinance is one of the main reasons why Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio don't have a deep history of slavery and didn't have a large number of slaves. Part of it dealt with the climate. Part of it dealt with their economy wasn't largely dependent upon slavery. Just like in Michigan, the economy was not largely dependent upon slavery, but also the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 largely abolished slavery in those areas. Okay, so, but you can watch the presentation that I did and I get deeper into it. Within these words, the single greatest change wrought by the Civil War was officially noted in the Constitution. Now, so they talk about the ratification process and give you some background information on the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. And here they talk about the Northwest Ordinance as well. I think is Senate.gov has a good article on the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Senate.gov is the official website of the U.S. Senate, and they have a history section there also. So when I teach this history, I take you to the history section of the U.S. Senate, take you to the history section of the U.S. House of Representatives, things of this nature. Lincoln believed that a constitutional amendment was necessary to ensure the end of slavery. In 1864, Congress debated several proposals. Some insisted on including provisions to prevent discrimination against blacks by the Senate Judiciary Committee, provided the eventual language. Okay, but the Senate Judiciary Committee provided the eventual language. It borrowed from the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, as I stated, when slavery was banned from the area north of the Ohio River. Okay, the Senate passed the amendment in April 1864. So all this was one of the problems, because in the interview that I did with Dr. Darrell Scott, we dealt with the misinformation in Dr. Ava DuVernay's, not Dr. Ava DuVernay, in Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th. And I saw the documentary when it came out, and I did a presentation here in the Detroit area at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe dealing with the origins of the war on drugs, you know, going back to 1875 and Chinese men working on the railroads, being the anti-opium laws in San Francisco dating back to 1875. But I talked about the origins of Richard Nixon's war on drugs, because Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs, President Richard Nixon, June 17th, 1971. Okay, and we dealt with, you know, why marijuana was made illegal going back to 1937, and Harry J. Anslinger, who was the first chairman of the Federal Bureau of the National Narcotics Bureau, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Harry J. Anslinger, 1937. All of that, we dealt with all that history. Okay, so, but the premise of the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay is that you know, the 13th Amendment re-enslaved African Americans, things of this nature because of the loophole. That's false. And if you watch the interview that I did with Dr. Daryl Scott, and we're going to re-air that here on the African History Network. If you watch that interview, we got deep into that history and showed how it was false. And when people repeat that misinformation, they usually don't talk about the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 because they don't understand this history. But that's something that I explained to the Detroit Reparations Task Force dealing with this conversation. Okay, when Georgia ratified the 13th Amendment on December 6, 1865, the institution of slavery effectively ceased to exist in the United States. And then it was adopted December 18th, 1865. But Georgia became, I think it was the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment. So you can check this out here at history.com, which is the official website of the History Channel. 13th Amendment ratified December 6, 1865. So you have some people who say, well, it's all right to celebrate June 19th, commemorate June 19th, but we also have to celebrate December 6th, 1865. I agree. I agree with that. And when we have these celebrations around Juneteenth, and I deal with this, you know, I speak at different Juneteenth celebrations. When we have these celebrations around Juneteenth, it's all right to come together and have fun, but we have to deal with history, economics, law, and politics. History, economics, law, and politics. And we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. This is extremely important. We have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to force into a national conversation a history that Republicans especially are passing laws in state legislatures to suppress the teaching of that history in schools. Okay, so Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to do that and correct the misinformation in the media and educate people on this history. And the way you treat a people is largely based upon what you think about a people. What you think about a people is largely based upon what you've been taught about a people. What you've been taught about a people is largely based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about a people. So this is why Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who co-founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1915, and who created Negro History Week in 1926, which became Black History Month. This is why he said the history of African Americans had to be taught in every school across the country, not just in schools that we attended, but he understood that everybody had to learn our history. And if you have seen the interview that I did in early 2024 with my friend Professor Manu Ampem, dealing with ancient African civilizations, one of the topics we got into was dealing with the history of Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his research on Africa, but also the creation of the ASALH, Association of the Study of African American Life and History. Okay, all right, now let's continue. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. And visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you like this type of information, visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, because you can register for this 12-week online history course that starts up Saturday, November 9th, 2024. Classes on sale, $80. You can use this with your children. You can download our lesson plan. We have an extensive lesson plan here for each class session. We cover thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. All right, let's continue here. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so a lot of people ask, you know, how you pronounce your last name. Last name is Imhotep, I-M-H-O-T-E-P. Now, who was Imhotep? Imhotep was one of the greatest people that ever lived in human history. He was a high priest, a physician, an architect. He was a designer of the step pyramid at Saqqara for Nasubiti Zoger, or Pharaoh Zoger, in the Third Dynasty. He was known as the world's first multi-genius. Okay. He lived somewhere circa 3000 BC. You'll see some estimates 2700 BC to 3000 BC, somewhere around there. Okay. This book here by Dr. Malefi Keti Asante, who I also interviewed in 2023, my friend Dr. Malefi Keti Asante, who's a history professor at professor of African American Studies at Temple University in Philadelphia. He's a prolific author of dozens of books dealing with Africa and African American history. This is one of his books here. We use this in the class, The Egyptian Philosophers, Ancient African Voices, from Imhotep to Akhenaten. Okay, this right here. So you don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. We show you excerpts on the screen. If you want to have them for your own personal library, that's fine. The Egyptian Philosophers, Ancient African Voices, from Imhotep to Akhenaten. Now, Imhotep means he who comes in peace in the ancient Medu Neter language. And he was known as the world's first multi-genius. Now, these are two famous statues of Imhotep. Okay. So this is Imhotep, and this is not Imhotep. In the 2001 movie, The Mummy Returns, the villain's name was Imhotep. And you have this Arab Eurasian looking actor, Arnold Vosloo, who portrayed High Priest Imhotep in the movie The Mummy Returns. Okay. Consequently, many of our children think that one of our greatest ancestors was evil and not of African descent. Okay, so he was a high priest in the movie, and he was a villain. Okay. Now here's a picture of the step pyramid that Imhotep was the architect of. Now, also, this is why we have to be so guarded of the type of imagery and information that we allow our children to consume. Okay, because as Dr. Linda Jeffries, one of my teachers, says, whoever controls the images controls the self-esteem, the self-development, the self-worth of the people. Here's a picture of the step pyramid at Saqqara, who Imhotep was the architect of. Now, this was a early form of pyramid building called a mastaba, a flat bench pyramid, the mastaba, okay, which is different than the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure that are more sloped and it's a more intricate design. So we talk about the BC and AD dating system, as well as CE, Common Era, and before the Common Era as well. There's a concerted effort to get away from the Christian-based dating system, which was popularized by the Venerable Bede, an English monk named Bede, B-E-D-E, in 8th century, in 8th century Common Era AD. There's a concerted effort to get away from that. All right, now, the 1619 Project, everybody has heard about the 1619 Project. And as I said before, Donald Trump led an attack on the 1619 Project. And then he created, when he was president, he created the 1776 Commission, the 1776 Commission that put out a non-historical, ahistorical view of history. Luckily, President Joe Biden disbanded the 1776 Commission when he became president, and he took down that report that they had at whitehouse.gov. All right. But what a lot of people don't know, and I've done some presentations in the past before about this, much of what we've been told about Virginia's first Africans, August 20th, 1619, is wrong. Okay. And contrary to popular belief, African people were here in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. Now, this is not saying Native Americans didn't exist, anything like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there were African people here before the people who we call, there were African people here before the people who we have been taught to call Native Americans. All right. We'll get to that in just a minute. So this is a historical marker at Fort Monroe in Virginia, and it notes the arrival of the first Africans in Virginia. This is from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. There's a good article from VirginiaMercury.com from August 11th, 2019, called Much of What We've Been Told About Virginia's 1619 First Africans is Wrong. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 First Africans is wrong. And, you know, when we had that 400 year anniversary in or commemoration in 2019, I did a series of interviews with Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Dr. Wade Nobles, and Dr. David Imhotep. Okay, so those are on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. I'm gonna dig into our archives and edit those and rebroadcast those also, because I have hundreds of shows that I've done over the past 14 years that I've been doing the African History Network show. Some interviews I've forgotten about, some topics I discussed that I've forgotten about, and I go through and see the videos on YouTube or on Blog Talk Radio, etc. In my archives. I was like, wow, I totally forgot about that. But most of them I do remember. So there's a good article from the Washington Post that deals with 1526. And this is something that I talk about in my lectures, how people will talk about 1619, but they won't discuss 1526 because the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory we call South Carolina and Georgia, the South Carolina, Georgia area, 93 years before 1619, 93 years before 1619. There's a good article from the Washington Post called Before 1619, There Was 1526. The mystery of the first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. And in this article, it talks about how Spanish explorers brought 100 slaves to a doomed settlement in South Carolina or Georgia. Within weeks, the subjugated revolted, then vanished. Okay. I want to pull up the article from the Mercury News. I want to pull that one up because I hear a lot of people saying that Africans first came to this land in August 20, 1619. Okay. And even though that did happen, usually they don't talk about the fact that this was our land stolen from us and we were here going back at least 51,700 years ago. I'm going to come to that in just a minute. But let's look at this article here from VirginiaMercury.com. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. So this is a good article by Rex Springston, August 11th, 2019. And I'm just going to share an excerpt of it. Okay. In this piece here, it talks about what really happened. Okay. In 1619. In late July or early August that year, historians say 2 English privateers, pirate ships, little more than pirate vessels, but operating with government sanction, attacked an overcrowded Portuguese slave ship en route to Veracruz in the Gulf of Mexico and stole about 60 enslaved Africans. So the Portuguese slave ship was called the San Juan Batista, and they captured about 350 Africans from Angola, okay, and put them on the San Juan Batista. And there were 2 English pirate ships, the White Lion and the Treasurer. They're going to hijack the San Juan Batista and take about 60 African captives. Okay, about a third of them had died on the brutal voyage. About a third of the 350 captives had died on the brutal voyage. In late August, one of the English ships, the White Lion, Lion, the White Lion, showed up at Point Comfort at the mouth of the James River in present-day Hampton, Virginia, and sold perhaps 30 Africans for desperately needed supplies. So it would say 20 and some odd. So around 20, maybe 30, but 20 and some odd Africans. Was that the beginning of slavery in the New World? No. Historians say the Spanish had enslaved Africans in present-day Latin America for more than a century. The beginning of slavery in what became the U.S. Was this the beginning of slavery in what became the U.S.? No. The Spanish took enslaved Africans to a settlement in the present-day Carolinas in 1526. Okay, the Georgia, South Carolina area in 1526, as I just stated. That's 93 years before 1619. These African slaves rebelled and the settlement failed. Also, the Spanish took African slaves to St. Augustine, Florida, which, unlike the Jamestown colony in Virginia, still thrives. That was in 1565. Okay. And we know that you had Africans being taken into Bermuda in 1616, which was an English colony. It turns out that enslaved Africans were taken to English-controlled Bermuda, part of North America, in 1616. So that's 3 years before, even though that's not part of the contiguous United States, but that was an English colony. That's 3 years before 1619. Okay, so read the rest of this article as well, and we deal with this in the class. Much of what we've been told about Virginia's 1619 first Africans is wrong. The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is that codified slave laws did not exist in any of the 13 colonies, or what will become the 13 colonies, in 1619. Okay, codified slave laws didn't exist then. If you look at one of the books we use in the class is Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. And I think I have it in this presentation here, the page 40 from the 6th edition of Before the Mayflower. And if I don't have it, I'll pull it up. Let me see here. Where is that? Okay, it's later in the presentation right here. This is from page 40 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr. Okay, and then you have to understand Bacon's Rebellion also to understand this, and we deal with Bacon's Rebellion in the class as well. And actually, let me show you this here. Okay, I have it. I forgot that I have I scanned this and have the PDF. So this is what I show you in class. I'll show you. I'm gonna zoom in. I'll go through this again. I'm gonna zoom in on this. Okay, so you should be able to see this better. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is from page 40 of Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett Jr., 6th edition. Okay. And what he's explaining in chapter 2 is how slavery evolves in the colonies. And the way that we think all of this evolved and happened is different than the way it actually happened. He talks about working together in the same field, sharing the same huts, in the same situation, and the same grievances. The first Black and white Americans, aristocrats, accepted. The first Black and white Americans, aristocrats, accepted, developed strong bonds of sympathy and mutuality. They ran away together, played together, and revolted together. They revolted together. That's Bacon's Rebellion, for instance, in 1676 in the colony of Virginia. They mated and married, siring a sizable mixed population. In the process, the black and white servants, the majority of the colonial population, created a racial wonderland that seemed somehow un-American in its lack of obsession about race and color. There was, to be sure, prejudice then, but it was largely English class prejudice, which was distributed without regard to race, creed, or color. There were also, without regard to race, creed, or color. There were also, needless to say, prejudiced individuals in the colony, but this is a fundamental difference between prejudice and racism. Their personal quirks and obsessions were not focused and directed by the organized will of a community. So racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, coming out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to education, access to opportunity, jobs, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people by encoding that into the laws, into the legal systems, etc. This is racism. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. That's different than prejudice. That's different than somebody having a predisposition to people based upon race, creed, or color, or not liking people, or bigotry, not liking people because of their race or ethnicity or something like that. Racism is a power structure. Racism is encoded into the laws and policies. Okay, so let's go back to this page 40 of Before the Mayflower. Their personal quirks and obsessions were not focused and directed by the organized will of a community. The basic division at that juncture was between servants and free people. The basic division at that juncture was between servants and free people, and there were whites and blacks on both sides of the line of servants and free people. Of all the improbable aspects of this situation, the oddest to many blacks and whites is that white people did not seem to know that they were white. It appears from surviving evidence that the first white colonists had no conception of themselves as white people. The legal documents identified whites as Englishmen and or Christians. Englishmen and or Christians. The word white, with this burden of arrogance and biological pride, developed late in the century, late in the 17th century, late in the 1600s, as a direct result of slavery and the organized debasement of blacks. So this is going to be after Bacon's Rebellion of 1676. The same point can be made from the other side of the line. For a long time in colonial America, there was no legal name to focus white anxiety. The first blacks were called blackamoors, Moors, Negers, and Negars, N-E-G-E-R-S, Negers, and Negars, N-E-G-A-R-S, okay? Blackamoors and Moors, M-O-O-R-S. The word negro, a Spanish and Portuguese term for black, did not come into general use in Virginia until the latter part of the century, latter part of the 17th century, the 1600s, okay? All right, so read this. This is from page 40, Before the Mayflower, 6th edition by Lerone Bennett Jr. Okay, so what he's talking about, then you have the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705, right? Virginia Slave Codes of 1705, in Section 4 of the Virginia Slave Codes, makes a distinction between Moors and Negroes. The Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. When we look quickly here at Bacon's Rebellion, there's a good article from the History Channel on this. And it deals with, and I've talked about this in my classes as well, it deals with them burning down the town of Jamestown, Virginia. So if you look at this article here, why America's first colonial rebels burned Jamestown to the ground. How many people know this history? Why America's first colonial rebels burned Jamestown, Virginia to the ground. Bacon's rebellion was triggered when a grab for Native American lands was denied. This is from October 10th, 2023. It was updated, originally August 2nd, 2019, by Aaron Blakemore for history.com. Excellent article. Okay. And here's a depiction of them burning Jamestown, Virginia to the ground right here. Okay, so very briefly here. A lot of people in this group have shot. Okay, so very briefly here. I'm going to skip over some of this. It talks about Nathaniel Bacon. So long story short, what was happening is you had the tobacco plantations in the colony of Virginia, and the white indentured servants and the African and the enslaved Africans, they were both being exploited by the same people. Okay, and the poor whites, all of this, they were both being exploited by the wealthy plantation owners. At the time, wealthy settlers had built profitable tobacco plantations and used their crops to pay high colonial taxes. But for poorer Virginians, times were lean. Only people who owned land could vote, and the indentured servants and poor Virginians who did not felt disenfranchised. Poor farmers had been hit hard by falling tobacco prices, and many on the borders of the colony's frontier wanted to expand westward. There they faced threats from Native Americans intent on protecting their ancestral lands. When the colonists called on their governor for military support, he refused. Okay, let me fast forward to this. Okay. Okay, so they talk about Nathaniel Bacon, and let's go here. Bacon declared a rebel by Virginia governor. In response, Governor Berkeley declared Nathaniel Bacon a rebel and scheduled elections for a new assembly to solve the problem for good. But Bacon was immediately elected to that legislative body, and when he headed to Jamestown, Virginia, to begin his tenure there, he was met with a chilly welcome. Okay, so Bacon gathered his troops. A few weeks later, he marched toward Jamestown, Virginia, with 500 supporters, the rebels, and another demand to lead the colony into war against Native Americans. As Nathaniel Bacon's men stood off with Governor Berkeley's men, the governor opened his shirt and showed Bacon his bare chest. Quote, "Here, shoot me," yelled Governor Berkeley, daring Nathaniel Bacon to shoot. Instead, let me see, what the hell, where did that go? Okay, instead, Nathaniel Bacon retreated, traveling throughout Virginia, recruiting other disgruntled rebels. Let's see here. Okay. In response, Nathaniel Bacon and his men rushed into Jamestown, rushed into Jamestown, Virginia, burning and pillaging as they went. On the night of September 19th, they torched the entire town, burning it to the ground. This is the entire town of Jamestown, Virginia. On the night of September 19th, they torched the entire town, burning it to the ground. As the embattled governor fled, Nathaniel Bacon's supporters terrorized what remained of the town and the governor's supporters. Okay. Now, I don't know if this was the inspiration for the song, the roof is on fire. We don't need no water. You know, you remember that song? I don't know if Bacon's rebellion and them burning down the town of Jamestown, Virginia was the inspiration for that. Maybe it was. I don't know. Okay. But what's going to happen is this is going to cause a drastic shift in the history that we still feel today. How Bacon's rebellion planted the seeds of race-based slavery. In the aftermath of the rebellion, white planters reacted with alarm to the anger they had seen among the Black Virginians who had joined Bacon's rebellion, because they realized the white indentured servants, poor whites, enslaved African Americans, free African Americans, they all realized that they were being oppressed by the same people, the wealthy elite there in Virginia, the tobacco plantation owners. They realized they had a common enemy, and they all united against their common enemy. Quote, the planters had not been able to control this rowdy labor force of servants and slaves, end quote, historian Ira Berlin told PBS.org, Public Broadcasting System. But soon after Bacon's rebellion, they increasingly distinguished between people of African descent and people of European descent. They enact laws which say that people of African descent are hereditary slaves. So it's going to be after Bacon's rebellion that they're going to institute what we call chattel slavery, in that you are enslaved for perpetuity. Prior to that, as I stated earlier, codified slave laws didn't come into existence until 1641 in colony of Massachusetts. Okay, and then other colonies are going to adopt it. You know, and prior to that, you were an indentured servant for 3 to 5 years, something of that nature, right? So this whole thing is going to evolve. Bacon's rebellion is going to expedite this, and it's going to cause a shift. And then you're going to have the Virginia Slave Codes of 1705. Okay, now planters feared that their white indentured servants could do. They feared what their white indentured servants could do, so they slowly eliminated the system of indentured servitude, relying instead on enslaved Black people, enslaved Africans, to work their plantations. Also, in about 1680, in England, the economy in England improves. So there is a declining amount of people willing to come to the colonies to enter into indentured servitude as well. So you start having a labor shortage. Okay, so now they're shifting more towards African people for slave labor, and they're developing more laws surrounding slavery. Planters feared what their white indentured servants could do, so they slowly eliminated the system of indentured servitude, relying instead on enslaved African people to work their plantations. Backlash from Bacon's rebellion is credited with helping kick off the racial distinctions that defined the colonies and the United States that followed. And we're still dealing with the consequences of the backlash to Bacon's rebellion to this day. Okay, read the rest of this article here. Okay, why America's first colonial rebels burned Jamestown to the ground. Okay, this was Bacon's Rebellion. The article could be subtitled "The roof is on fire," you know, but I guess they didn't want to. I guess they didn't like that title. I told them that's what you should call it, but I guess they didn't like that. So it is what it is. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up. Give us a heart. Give us a like on this broadcast. You can register for this 12-week online history course that I teach at our web. You can register at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. And then we go through and analyze the transatlantic slave trade as well. It's called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Class number 1 starts Saturday, November 4th, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we do the classes live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. Okay. Click right here to register here for it. You can use this content with your children as well. I would say it's PG-13. It's not overly graphic. We won't do a lot of cursing, anything like that. It's interactive. You can ask questions. We have a live text chat. You can see me. I can't see you. So you don't have to worry about, you remember during COVID and everybody was on Zoom going to work, and you're at home, you got your pajama bottoms on, but you got a suit on top or something like that, or a blouse on top. Okay. So you can wear whatever you want to wear. Okay. I don't take attendance in the class, anything like that. Download the class lesson plan here as well. I'm going to post a link here so you can register for the class. It's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Also, follow me on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. My YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. And on Instagram, Michael Imhotep as well. You can also, if you want to support us through Cash App or PayPal, you can do that also. You scroll down the page, we have our Cash App information, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. We added information here, information about the African History Network show, Sundays, 9 p.m. 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But here's our Cash App information, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there, most likely. You click on the link. It takes you to our Cash App QR code. Okay, so you can scan that. These are some fake African History Network Cash App accounts. There's 5 that I have identified. I don't know what Cash App is doing. I'm still trying to get them to shut these fake African History Network Cash App accounts down. Like this one here says, the AHN show, SHO. Ours is the AHN show, SHOW. So they've been stealing money from us. Here's you can click on this link. That's our link for PayPal also. Okay. All right, let's continue here. Let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So I want to go to this clip here of Dr. David Imhotep. And I showed this in class. This is from, I think this is about 2011. Dr. David Imhotep was on he was interviewed by WKRP in Cincinnati. Okay. So we deal with, a lot of you have seen the interviews I've done over the past few years with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, and his follow-up book, The First Americans Were Africans, Revised and Expanded. We know he became an ancestor in late 2023. But his book deals with 713 footnotes. It's backed up by 7 peer-reviewed articles. And on page 14 of his book, he talks about how evidence of an African presence 51,700 years ago in a campsite in Allendale County, South Carolina, was discovered by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. They found 13 different types of evidence that thoroughly document an African presence in the land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. So they found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. They found 13 different types of evidence thoroughly documented in African presence. This right here is a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. This is an article that came out 20 years ago, November 18th, 2004, from ScienceDaily.com, ScienceDaily.com. The name of this article is New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 years ago, okay? And an excerpt of the article from ScienceDaily.com, and this is a scientific website. They have all types of archaeological discoveries, scientific discoveries, things of this nature. An excerpt from the article says, radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, okay? Indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. So these humans were the short-statured Africans known as the Khoisan, okay? The short-statured Africans known as the Khoisan that come from Southern Africa. An October 2012 genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. So this is an article from Science magazine. Now here are two Khoisan sisters. These are the short-statured Africans. The Khoisan live mainly in Southern Africa, in territories spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into two groups, hunters and gatherers, known as the Sans people, or Sans people, and keepers of livestock, known as the Khoi people, okay? Sara Baartman, Sarta J. Baartman, was Khoisan, okay, also known as Hottentot Venus. And, you know, she was sexually exploited in England in the 19th century. The Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds that are not found in the languages of their neighbors, okay? There's an article from AtlantaBlackStar.com called 5 Ethnic Groups That Prove the First Humans Were Black. And it talks about the Khoisan. Okay, now here is the Dr. David Imhotep on being interviewed on WKRP in Cincinnati, Channel 5. For those that remember the TV show with Venus Flytrap and Lonnie Anderson from the late 1970s, early 1980s, about the radio station WKRP in Cincinnati, there really is a WKRP in Cincinnati. I don't know if there's a radio station, but there is a TV station. Let's go to this clip.
Wow, and we should say, we have a picture of the book too. It's the first Americans were Africans, and we were talking about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima because I remember back in the 1980s, my dad took me to hear him. He came here to Cincinnati, and his book was They Came Before Columbus, and he talked about you know, how Africans were here. He had a lot of, I mean, great research information, and so it was just kind of eye-opening. But we haven't heard a lot about that recently. So tell us how you got involved here.
I'm showing that Africans not only came before Columbus, they came.
Wow, and we should say, and we have a picture of the book too. It's the first Americans were Africans, and we were talking about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima because I remember back in the 1980s, my dad took me to hear him. He came here to Cincinnati, and his book was "They Came Before Columbus," and he talked about how Africans were here. He had a lot of, great research information, and so it was just kind of eye-opening. But we haven't heard a lot about that recently. So tell us how you got involved here.
I'm showing that Africans not only came before Columbus, they came before the Indians.
So you're going even farther back.
I'm going farther back, at least 56,000 years old.
Okay, now we've got a graphic up here about 130,000 years ago.
Yeah, well, they sailed over here. And when I lecture, people say, well, wait a minute, humans weren't sailing, let alone they weren't boating 130,000 years ago. And I beg to differ. Last year, New York Times quoted the BBC, and they wrote an article on how in Crete they have found a stone industry of stone tools dating back to at least 130,000 years. And Crete has been an island in the middle of the Mediterranean for 5 million years. So they had to sail, and it was a continuous civilization, which means they were going back and forth. They knew how to navigate. So if they got to Crete 130,000 years ago, it's easy 70,000 years later that they could make it to the Americas at 56,000 years ago.
Right. That's really, now how did you even get back to this research? This is just, did you start by reading They Came Before Columbus, and then you expanded on that research?
Yes. You see, 36 years ago, Dr. Van Sertima's book came out, and this information is piled on for 36 years. So many different things, so many cutting-edge articles and things have been found since then.
Yeah, and so what's the reaction you get when you talk about how Africans came here even before Native Americans?
People are amazed. They're shocked. They're shocked. First comes shocks, and then they're smiling, and some frown, of course.
And then, and what about the school systems? Because, have we gotten this information to the educational system?
Not yet. The book has only been out for a month and a half.
And what kind of feedback are you getting though when you go around and talk about this? I'm assuming you're doing lectures around the country.
Yeah, well, I always bring my peer-reviewed articos.
Okay.
Because my thesis, which is the same as my title, "The First Americans Were Africans," is backed up by 7, soon to be 8, peer-reviewed journal articles, which is the height of academia.
Wow. And so you've got credibility. People can see this research. What do you think? Do you think this is going to change history at all? Well,
for hundreds of years in Europe, people thought the world was flat, and it took a while for them to be able to say the world was round in order to go out there and navigate and see that it was indeed round. So it's going to take a little while for them to get around this, but it will happen.
And so what part of Africa were the Africans from who came to Brazil?
Well, the DNA, the Genome Project found that the earliest ones are the ones that they found in Tierra del Fuego, in the very tip of South America in 1874, 1876, were the short Africans, the Khoisan, who spoke with clicks like that. The Gods Must Be Crazy did a movie on that.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Yes. So they have
about the Coca-Cola bottle that fell in, yeah.
Yes, they have the oldest DNA and the oldest language on the planet, and they were all over.
Oh, wow.
All over all 3 Americas, as well as Asia.
Well, have they done any DNA tests in Brazil to see that?
Yes, they have. The Genome Project went all around the world. There are 100,000 people participated.
Wow.
Taking DNA swabs.
And so first we know that it's possible to get over here by canoe. And second of all, the DNA from that group of Africans is in Brazil.
The most important thing not to forget to ask me, well, I will tell you that, where do the Native Americans come from? Well, we've always been taught that they came across the Bering Straits from Asia. This is true, but they did not come until 3000 BC. There is no evidence of them coming before 3000 BC. So for 53,000 years, there were nothing but Africans in North, Central, and South America.
Wow.
When they come over 3000 BC, those two groups, the Africans and the Mongolians, get together, the Asians, get together, and their children are the Native Americans.
Wow.
This is why the Native Americans do not look Chinese. They are a little different than Chinese.
Right. Oh, that's, we need to learn. It makes a lot of sense, yes. Dr. Imhotep, and we need to learn our history.
All right. So that's an excerpt of that interview. And I interviewed Dr. David Imhotep, I think about 13 times on the African History Network show. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, there's a concerted effort to suppress the teaching of certain types of history in school. History of slavery, civil rights movement, different aspects of African American history, etc. And this is part of Project 2025 to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion, to dismantle the Department of Education. Chapter 18 deals with dismantling the Department of Education. I've actually been on some panels recently talking about Project 2025. So there was on October 18th, 2024, Donald Trump was on Fox and Friends, okay? And he's talking about dismantling the Department of Education. I'm going to show you this clip because I put together a video dealing with this. And it's important for people to understand Project 2025 is let me just show you this here, and I'm going to show you this clip, okay? It's from the Heritage Foundation, okay? I was talking about Project 2025 in 2023 because I found out about it in September, at least by September 2023 on Ali Velshi's show on MSNBC, okay? And then I went back and looked, and I saw some clips going back even to August of them talking about Project 2025. I saw those as well. But I definitely remember September 2023. And he was talking about the Heritage Foundation. I already knew about the Heritage Foundation and Paul Weyrick, who co-founded the Heritage Foundation in 1973. He founded the Heritage Foundation in 1973. But Project 2025 is called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. It was released in April 2023 by the Heritage Foundation, okay? For a lot of people, this was the first that they heard about the Heritage Foundation. And this was the first that they heard about Mandate for Leadership. The Heritage Foundation has been issuing Mandate for Leadership going back to 1981. Now, this website is from the Heritage Foundation. Just so you know, you can scroll all the way to down to the bottom at project2025.org. It tells you copyright the Heritage Foundation 2023-2024. Okay. So the Heritage Foundation has been issuing their Mandate for Leadership going back to 1981 and for the Reagan administration. And they talk about how the Reagan administration adopted 64% of the policies that they of the policy proposals that they made. That is on page, I think, 885 of Project 2025. And let me switch over, because when you go to this website, you can actually download a PDF of Project 2025. You can download the full, it's a PDF of the full 922 pages. And let me find something here, because I have the PDF here. I want to show you this here. I want the full thing though. What happened was the Reagan administration adopted 60% of the policies from Project 2025, from Mandate for Leadership in Reagan's first term. And let's see here. If we look at this article from the Heritage Foundation's website, heritage.org, and I'm going to actually pull up Project 2025 here. Hold on. I'm going to pull up the actual PDF. All right. Let's look at this article here, because Project 2025 is also a backlash to the racial reckoning that took place in America after the killing of George Floyd. And you have the attack on critical race theory, attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, things like this. All of this is connected. If we look at this here, this is from the Heritage Foundation's website, heritage.org. Reagan and Heritage, a unique partnership. This is from June 7th, 2004. June 7th, 2004. In here, it talks about the partnership in 1980. The partnership began in 1980. Ronald Reagan and the Heritage Foundation. It's hard to tell the story of one without much of the others. Heritage was President Reagan's favorite think tank, and Reagan was the embodiment of the ideas and principles Heritage holds dear. The partnership began in 1980 when Heritage provided the president-elect's transition team with detailed policy prescriptions on everything from taxes and regulation to trade and national defense. The published version of these recommendations, the 1,100-page Mandate for Leadership, was described by United Press International back then as, quote, a blueprint for grabbing the government by its frayed New Deal lapels and shaking out 48 years of liberal policy, end quote. The Heritage Foundation has been putting out their policy platform called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, for over 40 years, going back to 1981. Project 2025 is the latest version of Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Now, a lot of people found out, especially a lot of African Americans found out about this in July 2024 when Taraji P. Henson talked about it at the BET Awards and told everybody to look it up, Google it. That night, Project 2025 searches were trending on Google. But the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank founded in 1973 by Paul Weyrich, has been crafting policy for Republican administrations for over 40 years. So anybody that thinks there's no coordination between the Trump administration, in the first Trump administration, the Trump transition team, and the 140 people who worked in the Trump administration who helped write Project 2025, as well as Donald Trump. He didn't write Project 2025, but he knows about it. He knows about their policies. Anybody thinks he's ignorant of this and doesn't know anything about it is stupid. Either stupid or ignorant, one of them. Because the evidence is there. In 2017, Donald Trump spoke at a Heritage Foundation conference. And I'm going to show you some more evidence here in just a minute, because, see, your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. So the Heritage Foundation is telling you what they did in the Trump administration. The new president, in the Reagan administration, they tell you about the Trump administration also. The new president used Mandate to help realize his vision of a world free of communism an economy that didn't crush people's dreams with high taxes and regulations, and an America and an America that would and an America the world could admire once again. He gave copies to every member of his cabinet, talking about Ronald Reagan, because they printed it. I know Vice President Kamala Harris and other people say, can you believe that they wrote this down? Yes, they've been writing it down for over 40 years. The result, nearly 2/3 of mandates for leadership, 2,000 recommendations were adopted by the Reagan administration. Okay, nearly 2/3. You're talking about right about 64%. Because in one part of Project 2025, they tell you 64% of the 2,000 policy recommendations from the Heritage Foundation and Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, were adopted by the Reagan administration in Reagan's first term in office. A conservative commentator, William F. Buckley Jr., put it, the foundation had a great hour when Ronald Reagan was elected president and found waiting for him 3 volumes of heritage material designed to help him chart the nation's course in the right direction. It was really the wrong direction. 60% of the suggestions enjoined on the new president were acted upon, which is why Mr. Reagan's tenure was 60% successful, end quote, William F. Buckley said. Now, nobody said that Ronald Reagan wrote Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. In his second term, Ronald Reagan turned again to the Heritage Foundation for ideas and adopted many of them. He recited 22 specific proposals from Mandate for Leadership 2 in his second inaugural address in 1985, prompting the New York Times to say, quote, while the wording of the president's speech and the foundation's document were different, many of the proposals were strikingly similar. It's the same thing between Project 2025 and Donald Trump's Agenda 47. Many of the proposals are strikingly similar. Nobody said Ronald Reagan wrote Mandate for Leadership 2, but he adopted many of those policies. He adopted in his first term, about 64% of those policies. Okay, so read the rest of this here. This is for all the people that don't understand this background history. And then they give you a timeline of history and coordination between Ronald Reagan and the Heritage Foundation. This is at the Heritage Foundation's website. This is from June 7th, 2004. This article is from 20 years ago. Reagan and Heritage, a unique partnership. Some people may call it a partnership made in hell. You know, we won't go as far as to say something like that. Now, let me show you something else here. I want to show you this piece here. Where is that? This deals with Trump and Project 2025. Where is that? Hold on. I thought I had that. Hold on, let me find this. I thought I had it here with the other ones. This one deals with how in 2018, it talks about Trump adopting policies from the Heritage Foundation. Hold on. Where is that? Thought I had it here with my Heritage Foundation articles. Because I want to show this to you. Hold on, I'm gonna have to pull up a different one. What to know about the blueprint? Here is Heritage Foundation. What is that? Hold on, let me find it a different way. Here is Project 2025. So this is the actual, you can download the PDF from the Heritage Foundation. This is what I'm looking for right here. And you see it's called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, just like the other versions that they've been doing for over 40 years are called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. All right, now I want to go here. I think it's page 885. Okay, so this is from January 23rd, 2018. Okay. From the Heritage Foundation. This is at heritage.org. January 23rd, 2018. So this is during the Trump administration. It's called Trump Administration Embraces Heritage Foundation Policy Recommendations. And there's Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump speaking at a President's Club meeting of the Heritage Foundation in 2017. So he can't say he doesn't know who they are. In this article here from the Heritage Foundation's own website, it tells you 1 year after taking office, President Donald Trump and his administration have embraced nearly 2/3 of the policy recommendations from the Heritage Foundation's Mandate for Leadership. Okay, just look at this. Now, he said he don't know who they are. He knows nothing about Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, Project 2025. Is he pleading ignorance of Mandate for Leadership in 2017 and 2018? Because Project 2025 is not something new. It's a continuation of what the Heritage Foundation has been doing for 40 years and a continuation of their policy agenda that they publish each election cycle called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Okay, people act like this is just something like brand new that fell out the sky. No, you don't understand the history behind this. The Mandate for Leadership series includes 5 individual publications totaling approximately 334 unique policy recommendations. Now, this is in 2018, during the Trump administration. Analysis completed by Heritage Foundation determined that 64% of the policy prescriptions were included in Trump's budget, implemented through regulatory guidance, or under consideration for action in accordance with the Heritage Foundation's original proposals. Now, are we supposed to believe that's all a coincidence and he don't know nobody? He knows nothing? This is in 2018. They're telling you what happened in 2017. The Heritage Foundation, at their own website, the same people who put up Project 2025, which is called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, they're telling you what they did in 2017 with the Trump administration. Analysis completed by Heritage Foundation determined that 64% of the policy prescriptions were included in Trump's budget, implemented through regulatory guidance, or under consideration for action in accordance with the Heritage Foundation's original proposals. Okay, now check this out. Quote, President Trump had an extraordinary successful first year. They're talking about 2017. Says Thomas Binion, Director of Congressional and Executive Branch Relations at the Heritage Foundation. Quote, he put a conservative on the Supreme Court, and he enacted historic pro-growth tax reform. They're talking about the $2 trillion tax cut for the millionaires and billionaires, and 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. That's what he's talking about. This analysis demonstrates the lesser-known policy success that his administration has been fighting hard to enact, end quote. They got this clip here from Fox News, okay, Fox Business. Thomas Binion discusses how Trump, let's see, what the hell? Let's just show this. Because a lot of people don't understand what's been happening the past 40 years. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. And I've heard a number of people that sent me messages on social media and all this stuff. Trump don't have nothing to do with the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 and things like this. 140. Let me show you something here. I guess I got a ton. Keep in mind, I was talking about Project 2025 and 2023 before a lot of the people out here talking about it now knew about it. Okay. I was talking about before it became huge on MSNBC and CNN and the Schedule F employees. The change with the Schedule F employees, I found out about that in July 2022 from Jonathan Swan's article from Axios.com. And that was before people started talking about that as well. So when I was speaking to the National Association of Black Counselors, I referenced this article from July 23rd, 2022 by Jonathan Swan. I'll show you that in just a minute here. Let's see. Let me look at, I want to show you this piece from CNN, just so you understand. We can put this in context. Donald Trump claims not to know who's behind Project 2025, right? Just like he said he didn't know who David Duke was, the Ku Klux Klan leader. He said he didn't know who David Duke was. Remember that? And then video came out of him years before talking about David Duke. This is a good article from CNN.com. Trump claims not to know who is behind Project 2025. A CNN review found at least 140 people who worked for him are involved. A CNN review found at least 140 people who worked for him are involved. Now, this is from July 11, 2024. So all these people around him know about Project 2025, but he's ignorant. He knows absolutely nothing. Don't know who the Heritage Foundation is. I don't have anything to do with them. I have nothing to do with Project 2025. People that worked in your administration, at least 140, from Dr. Ben Carson, the Tom Homan, who headed up the Homeland Security, to Russell Vought, who headed up the Office of Management and Budget, to Ken Cuccinelli. You got all these people that work for you are involved in writing this, but you don't know nothing. 6 of his former cabinet secretaries helped write or collaborated on the 900-page playbook for a second Trump term published by the Heritage Foundation. 4 individuals Trump nominated as ambassadors were also involved, along with several enforcers of his controversial immigration crackdown. And about 20 pages are credited to his first deputy chief of staff. In fact, at least 140 people who worked with the Trump administration had a hand in Project 2025, the CNN review found, including more than half of the people listed as authors, editors, and contributors to Mandate for Leadership, the project's extensive manifesto for overhauling the executive branch. Dozens more who staff Trump's government hold positions with conservative groups advising Project 2025, including his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and longtime advisor, Stephen Miller. These groups also include several lawyers deeply involved in Trump's attempts to remain in power, such as his impeachment attorney, Jay Sekulow, and 2 of the legal architects of his failed bid to overturn the 2020 presidential election, Cleta Mitchell and John Eastman. Now, all these people are involved, but he don't know nothing. To quantify the scope of the involvement from Trump's orbit, CNN reviewed online biographies, LinkedIn profiles, and news clippings for more than 1,000 people listed on published directories for the 110 organizations on Project 2025's advisory board, as well as the 200 plus names credited with working on Mandate for Leadership. Overall, CNN found nearly 240 people with ties to Project 2025 and to Donald Trump, covering nearly every aspect of his time in politics and the White House, from day-to-day foot soldiers in Washington to the highest levels of his government. The number is likely higher because many individuals' online resumes were not available. Read the rest of this here. Okay, read the rest of this. Trump claims not to know who is behind Project 2025. A CNN review found at least 140 people who work for him are involved. All right, now I want to go back to this. I want to show this video here from, I said I would show you this video from Fox Business here. Let's go. And okay, let's go to this.
Year in office than Ronald Reagan did in his first year with respect to conservative agenda. In fact, the conservative group made this determination based on its own agenda of policy recommendations, of which President Trump embraced 64%. President Reagan embraced only 49%. So has President Trump become the new gold standard of conservatism? With me now to discuss Madison Jesse Otto, Washington Times columnist, also National Coalition for Trump advisor, and Tommy Binion, Heritage Foundation, Congressional and Executive Branch Relations Director. Tommy, so the Heritage Foundation has the Mandate for Leadership, 5 individual publications, 334 unique policy recommendations, and President Trump took up 64% of them in his budget. Does that make him the new gold standard of conservatism?
Absolutely. President Trump is a conservative president. And also, this analysis shows that he's a very active president. He's adopted many of these recommendations and pushed them forward and accomplished many of them. It's things like the Paris Climate Change Agreement. It's things like repealing Barack Obama's net neutrality regulations. Those types of things, these are sort of under-the-radar accomplishments, under-the-radar policies that he's pursued. And yes, they're conservative, and yes, they're good for the country, and this analysis gives him credit for that.
You know, Madison, and a lot of the things that we have on the list there really angered the left progressives in the mainstream media, getting out of the Paris Climate Accord, repealing net neutrality. President Trump took a lot of heat of those.
Yeah, you know, Charles, what an incredible year for conservatives, and I imagine that we're going to have 3 to 7 more incredible years under President Trump. You know, a lot of people looking back were on the fence, conservatives specifically, concerned about some of the things that he said, but you cannot judge him by what he said, but by what he does. He's always been someone that planned to back up his words with actions. That's exactly what he did. We look at the Supreme Court. That's why a lot of people end up coming over the fence, jumping to the side and voting for him. And when he's talking about making an impact long term, let's look at the federal district courts and let's look at the federal appellate courts. I mean, this is places where he's going to have an effect long after his presidency is over in the world of conservatism.
Madison, do you think then that ultimately people should say, hey, forget about the rhetoric and the occasional tweet that may be distasteful, if you will, and look at the achievements and the direction we're going? That ultimately is what matters?
Oh, absolutely, because guess what? These words and silly tweets that people agree or disagree on and bicker about aren't going to affect people's lives, but these policies and these decisions that he's making in the Oval Office are going to affect our lives not only now, like I said, but for decades to come. And so I think that's what people need to keep in mind, and I think that's what they will keep in mind when we go to the midterms in 2018 and we look at back, you know, to 2016. They were on the fence hoping this would happen, and it did happen. So I think they're going to do that in 2018 and 2020 as well.
Tommy, I know it's a badge of honor, but some people may say approximately 70 former Heritage employees either work for the Trump transition team or are now part of the administration. Is that too much influence by one particular organization?
No, I don't think so. That's absolutely a strategy of the Heritage Foundation to better the country. The individuals, the researchers, the smart people here at the Heritage Foundation have a passion for this country. They're patriots, and they went to work in the administration to make the country a better place. I don't think that's a knock against Heritage or too much influence at all. And yes, it's those 70 individuals and the president and the rest of his administration that enacted and adopted these policies. Right. And we believe the reason we work here, the reason we work so hard on these policies is because we believe that ultimately they're going to deliver a better America for the American people.
Quickly, before I let you go, Tommy, is there one of the items that ranks high that wasn't adopted that you'd like to still see implemented? I know there's a lot of them, but the one that maybe sticks out the most to you.
Repeal and replace Obamacare. It's got to go. Healthcare is too expensive. That depends on the Congress. The president's leading on it, but it's got to happen.
Thank you both very, very much. Appreciate it. President Trump.
All right. So, and once again, the Heritage Foundation wants to repeal and replace the Affordable Health Care Act. Donald Trump has nothing to replace it with. He has a concept of a plan. Okay. These are policies coming from the Heritage Foundation. Now that clip that I just showed you, that clip is from 2018. And let me go to it. Okay, so that is from January 25th, 2018, right here. That's on the Heritage Foundation's website. I mean, their YouTube channel right here. So the name of that clip, Tommy Binion, B-I-N-I-O-N, discusses how Trump has embraced 64% of Heritage policy recommendations on Fox Business. Okay. That's at Heritage Response Room, one of their YouTube channels. And that is from January 25th, 2018. So they're showing you the coordination between the Heritage Foundation and the Trump administration adopting 64% of the policy recommendations from Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Okay. Now, Project 2025, as I've said, that's just the latest version of Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Now, I want to go back to that article here. This one right here from January 23rd, 2018, from the Heritage Foundation's website. Trump administration embraces Heritage Foundation policy recommendations. January 23rd, 2018, right? And they're talking about what happened during the first year of the Trump administration. Now, if you scroll down, past the video, it says, Heritage Foundation research analysts began developing the policy recommendations in 2016 during the presidential campaign with the following principles in mind: free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional American values, and a strong national defense. I'm not sure what traditional American values they're talking about. I mean, this is a guy who had sex with a porn star, cheated on all his wives, committed business fraud, committed sexual assault. What? And then later, you know, he incited the coup January the 6th, and his supporters assaulted over 140 police officers. I'm not sure what American values, traditional American values, they're talking about. But it goes on to say, with approximately 70 former Heritage Foundation employees working for the Trump transition team or as part of the Trump administration, the policy recommendations coming from Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise, have served as guidelines for reducing the size and scope of the federal government through specific and detailed actions. Okay, so then it goes on to say the first Mandate for Leadership was released in January 1981, containing policy proposals of reform that would make government more efficient and effective. President Ronald Reagan distributed Heritage's book at his first cabinet meeting. Quote, as President Biden did in the 1980s, Tom Binion said, President Trump has embraced the comprehensive recommendations made in the Mandate for Leadership. These achievements have led to economic growth, a stronger national defense, and a restoration of the rule of law. So Project 2025 is called Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. Trump knows about Mandate for Leadership, the one during his presidency. He's ignorant of this one, and it's from the same people. And at least 140 people that work for him wrote it. Over the past several months, now keep in mind, this article is from January 2018. Over the past several months, Heritage Foundation's executive branch relations staff reviewed the 334 policy recommendations and met with senior administration officials in the several agencies. Heritage analysts briefed administration officials on the recommendations, provided additional insight and information, and advocated for reform. Okay, but he knows nothing. And it goes through and shows some things that the Heritage Foundation got enacted from Mandate for Leadership under the Trump administration. Now, as President Obama said on the campaign trail, the fond economy that people remember was actually the Obama-Biden economy, because they saved the economy, brought us out of the recession, created 11.3 million jobs. They handed over a healthy economy to Donald Trump, 75 consecutive straight months of private sector job growth under Obama-Biden. They handed over a 4.7% unemployment to Donald Trump, and the employment rate kept going down. But it wasn't something that Trump did. He didn't create that economy. That was Obama-Biden that did that, starting out with the American Recovery Act in 2009, which was an $831 billion bill that had stimulus checks in there. Obama didn't put his signature on the stimulus checks. It jump-started the economy and created 10 years of private sector job growth. And under President Obama, you had 75 consecutive months of private sector job growth. So research that. All this history is connected. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Okay, let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation in the preview of this class. How you all like this type of information? We left off talking about Dr. David Imhotep, but then got into this discussion here because this deals with history as well. And you can visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. and you can register for this 12-week online history course that I teach. Class number 1 starts up Saturday, November 9th, 2024, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school, okay? We deal with thousands of years of history what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We deal with some of the attack on the teaching of history in schools, especially African-American history. You can download the full lesson plan here. Click on download, register right here for it as well. You can use this information with your children. I would say the content is PG-13. It's not overly graphic. We don't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. The 200 slides that we reference, 80 to 100 articles, 15 books that we reference. I show you the excerpts of the books on screen, so you don't have to buy any of them if you don't want to. You can get them for your personal library, but you don't have to buy the books to follow along in class. I'll show you video clips of interviews I've done with some of our scholars as well, like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Watakamane, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books that we use in the class, and Runoko Rashidi, as well as others. And my copy of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization is around here. I think it's on the bookshelf. Put on the bookshelf. Right here. Yeah, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder. This is a fantastic, fantastic book. Definitely want to get this for your library. Okay, so I talked about how Donald Trump said he would shut down the Department of Education. He said this on Fox and Friends. Okay, I want to go to this clip here to show you how elections have consequences. And Chapter 18 of Project 2025 deals with dismantling the Department of Education, which was created by President